No one at Lindenbrook Academy ever noticed the quiet boy with the too pale skin and the eyes that caught every shard of light like polished obsidian. But Claire noticed. She noticed the way Ethan flinched when someone brushed past him in the hallway, the way he kept his sleeves tugged down even in the heat, and the way the other students whispered the moment he walked by. On that rainy Thursday afternoon, just as the final bell echoed through the old stone halls, she heard the unmistakable sound of cruelty, the sharp laughter of kids who had never felt powerless a single day in their lives. And she ran toward it. She did not know that several meters away, behind the slightly open door of an unused classroom, an ancient being stood motionless, listening, his breath suspended. Claire turned the corner and saw them. 3 boys towering over Ethan, shoving him against the lockers. His books were on the floor, ripped. His lip was bleeding in a thin red line. She felt the heat rise in her chest. Not fear, but something older, something fiercely protective. "Enough," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. The bullies froze, more startled by her tone than her presence. Claire stepped in front of Ethan, blocking him with her body as if she had been doing it all her life. She had no idea that every word, every heartbeat, every tremor in her voice was being heard, studied, by the creature standing silently behind the door. That creature happened to be Ethan's father, the Vampire King. Ethan tried to speak, but she raised her hand gently, signaling for him to stay still. She faced the boys. "You don't get to touch him again," she said. Her voice didn't shake. It was not bravado, it was conviction. Something in the hallway shifted, a subtle change in the air, as if the light dimmed for half a second. Ethan noticed it. Claire did not. But the Vampire King, still hidden, leaned slightly closer to the doorframe, his face unreadable. It had been centuries since he had heard a human speak with such uncalculated courage. But before we continue, I want to invite you to something very special. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like. This helps me see that you support me and enjoy my stories. And comment below which city you're watching from. Now, let's continue. The boys scattered after a few tense seconds, muttering excuses under their breath as they hurried away. Claire exhaled, her shoulders dropping as the adrenaline faded. She knelt to pick up Ethan's torn notebook. "Are you all right?" she asked. Ethan nodded, though the trembling in his hands betrayed the truth. She noticed the bruise forming beneath his collarbone and frowned. Has this been happening for long? Ethan hesitated. His dark eyes darted toward the empty classroom beside them, as if seeking permission from someone she couldn't see. Then he whispered, "They don't like me. They think I'm strange." He paused. "They're not wrong." Claire softened. "Being different isn't a flaw, Ethan." She stood and brushed dust off his shoulders with a tenderness that surprised even her. Being different just means you see things the way others can't. Inside the classroom, the Vampire King felt something unsettling, a tug in his chest, something dangerously close to gratitude. Humans had never protected his kind. Humans feared, hunted, betrayed. Yet this woman had stepped between danger and his son without a hint of hesitation. Ethan glanced toward the door again, and then back at her. "Thank you, Miss Claire." He said the words carefully, as if unused to offering them. She smiled, but before she could reply, she sensed it. A presence, a weight in the air, something watching. The hallway felt colder, the lights humming louder. "We should get you home," she said. "Come on, I'll walk you out." As they walked together, the Vampire King finally stepped out from the shadows. Not close enough to be seen, but close enough to memorize the cadence of her voice and the way Ethan walked slightly nearer to her, as if trusting her already. His son had chosen to trust a human, and that was dangerous. The king pressed his palm briefly against the stone wall, feeling its temperature, feeling the echo of her courage lingering in the air like a scent. "Interesting," he murmured to himself, voice low as thunder. "Very interesting." He would watch her. He had to. No human interfered with his son's life, not without consequence. But none of them knew that the true danger ahead would come not from the king, but from what hunted him. Claire didn't know why she kept glancing over her shoulder as she walked Ethan across the empty courtyard, but something in her instincts pulsed like a quiet alarm. The rain had stopped, leaving the air damp and metallic, and every footstep echoed too loudly, as if the school grounds had suddenly grown cavernous. Ethan walked beside her in silence, clutching his torn notebook to his chest. Though he tried to hide it, Claire noticed the stiffness in his posture, the way he scanned every shadow as if expecting something to materialize from it. She wondered what kind of fear could hollow out a child this deeply. When they reached the front gate, a black car she had never seen before was already waiting. Its windows were tinted so dark that the interior looked like a void, swallowing all reflection. Ethan stiffened. Claire opened her mouth to ask if everything was all right, but the passenger door swung open before she could speak. A tall man stepped out, taller than any man she had ever seen, his posture impossibly straight, his presence so commanding that the air seemed to bend around him. His face was pale, sculpted with sharp lines, his eyes a deep garnet red that flickered like embers beneath dusk. Claire felt her heartbeat stall. Something about him was not human. She sensed it instantly, the way prey senses a predator. "Ethan," the man said. His voice was calm, almost gentle, yet it carried an unspoken authority that Claire felt in her bones. Ethan lowered his eyes immediately. "Father," he whispered. Claire blinked, startled. Father. He looked far too young for that. Young in appearance, but ancient in presence. The man's gaze shifted to her. Not a glance, an inspection. A slow, deliberate sweep that seemed to pierce through her thoughts, her fears, her intentions. She fought the instinct to step back. "You must be the teacher," he said. His tone wasn't rude, but it held no warmth. It was a statement, not an introduction. Claire cleared her throat. "I'm Claire. Ethan was having some trouble today, so I wanted to make sure he got home safely." The man's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly, as if the words unsettled him in a way he didn't intend to show. Ethan shifted in place. "Miss Claire, this is my father, Adrian." He swallowed. "We should go." But Adrian didn't move. He continued looking at her, the corner of his lip curving into something that wasn't quite a smile. "My son tells me you defended him." His voice was low, but something in it vibrated in the air, brushing coldly against her skin. Claire nodded slowly. "No child deserves to be mistreated." Adrian tilted his head the slightest degree. "And yet, you stood in front of him as if he were your own blood. Humans rarely take risks without expecting something in return." The accusation stung. "I didn't expect anything," she answered. "I just care about my students." For the first time, something flickered in Adrian's eyes. Not aggression, not skepticism, but curiosity. It was brief, like a spark before darkness swallows the light. He stepped aside, gesturing for Ethan to enter the car. "We appreciate your concern," he said, though the word appreciate sounded foreign in his mouth. "But from now on, Ethan will not require your protection." Ethan climbed into the car without meeting her gaze. Claire watched him, a sinking weight tightening beneath her ribs. Something was wrong. Something about Adrian's presence had drained every drop of color from Ethan's face. She forced herself to ask, "Ethan, will you be all right?" The boy hesitated. His lips parted, as if he wanted to say something, confess something. But Adrian's hand touched the car door lightly, not pushing it closed, but reminding him. Ethan's shoulders fell. "Yes, Miss Claire," he whispered. Claire nodded, though everything inside her recoiled. Adrian closed the door, then leaned his arms on the roof of the car, his gaze locking with hers once more. "I heard everything," he said quietly. "From the moment you confronted those boys." Claire's blood chilled. "Heard?" "Yes." His eyes glinted. "I am very attentive to my son's safety." The car engine hummed to life, a deep, powerful sound like a beast waking. Adrian stepped into the driver's seat. Before the door shut, he spoke again, barely above a whisper. "Do not worry yourself with matters that do not belong to your world." The door closed. The car pulled away. Claire stood frozen, rain beginning to fall again in slow, deliberate drops. She didn't know who or what Adrian truly was. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Ethan needed her, and whatever shadow hung over his life, it wasn't finished with her either. Claire barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan's face, pale, tight with fear, as if he were carrying a secret too heavy for his small shoulders. She also saw Adrian's eyes, that impossible red, looking at her like someone examining a threat rather than greeting a teacher. She tried to convince herself she was overthinking it. But the unease stayed, stretching through the night like a shadow trapped under her ribs. By morning, she had made a decision. She would check on Ethan. Not to interfere, just to make sure he was all right. But when she arrived at school, Ethan wasn't at his desk. His seat was empty, his backpack missing, his name barely visible in the dust that hadn't had time to settle. She searched the hallways, asked other teachers, checked the attendance list. Absent. No explanation. No call. No warning. A coil of worry tightened in her stomach, and she tried to mask it beneath the routine rhythm of teaching. During lunch break, she stepped outside to clear her thoughts. The courtyard felt strangely quiet, as if holding its breath. She leaned against the stone railing, letting the cold breeze brush her face. That was when she felt it. Someone watching. She turned slowly, expecting a student. Instead, a girl no older than 16 stood by the edge of the oak tree. She had the same pale skin as Ethan, the same impossibly dark eyes, but there was something else in her expression. Fear, sharpened into urgency. "You're Miss Claire, aren't you?" the girl asked. Her voice trembled. Claire nodded cautiously. "Yes. Are you looking for a teacher?" The girl shook her head. "I'm Layla, Ethan's sister." Claire blinked. Ethan had a sister? He had never mentioned it. Before she could respond, Layla stepped closer, her gaze darting around the courtyard as if expecting someone to emerge from the shadows. "You helped him yesterday," she whispered. "And he told me. I came because you need to know something." Claire's heart picked up pace. "Is Ethan all right?" Layla hesitated, then shook her head. "No, he's not." She looked toward the school building, her breath uneven. "My father doesn't trust humans. He never has. But he saw you protect Ethan, and that made him curious." Her lips pressed tightly together. "That's dangerous. My father is not someone who feels curiosity, not unless it's a warning sign." Claire frowned, confused and increasingly alarmed. "Layla, I don't understand. What are you trying to tell me? That you shouldn't go near our house? That you shouldn't get involved?" Her fingers twisted nervously at the hem of her sleeve. "Father is old, very old. And when he feels threatened, even a little," she hesitated. "Humans don't survive that." A chill swept through Claire, deeper than fear, closer to instinct. "Threatened? How could I threaten him?" Layla swallowed. "Because Ethan trusts you. And trust, for my father, is the most dangerous thing in the world." Claire tried to process her words, tried to hold on to logic, but everything about Layla, her trembling voice, her darting eyes, the way the air seemed to shift around her, made denial impossible. "Tell me where Ethan is," she said firmly. "If he's in danger, I need to help." Layla shook her head violently. "No, you can't. If he finds out I told you anything—" She stopped mid-sentence. Her gaze snapped to something behind Claire. Her body stiffened. Claire turned. Near the entrance gate stood Adrian, still as a statue, watching them. His presence sucked the warmth from the air. He didn't move, didn't speak, but Claire felt the force of his gaze like a cold hand closing around her throat. Layla stepped back. "I have to go," she whispered, voice cracking. "I'm sorry." And she hurried away, her steps barely touching the ground. Adrian didn't approach. He didn't need to. With a slow lift of his chin, he made his message unmistakable. Claire felt it like a command echoing through the courtyard. Stay away. She forced herself not to look away, even as her heartbeat hammered against her ribs. When Adrian finally turned and disappeared beyond the gate, she exhaled shakily, gripping the railing to steady herself. Fear twisted inside her, but beneath it, burning stubbornly, was something else. Resolve. Ethan wasn't in school. Layla was terrified. Adrian watched her every move, which meant one thing. Whatever was happening in that house, Ethan needed her now more than ever. Claire spent the rest of the day pretending to function, pretending to teach, pretending not to feel the echo of Adrian's stare gripping the back of her neck. But every moment felt stretched, fragile, as if the world had thinned to a single question pulsing in her chest. Where is Ethan? At dismissal, she stayed in her empty classroom long after the last student had gone, staring at the rain streaking the windows. She felt useless. And yet, somewhere inside her, A certainty kept rising like a tide. She couldn't walk away. Not now. She grabbed her coat and headed toward the parking lot. The sun hadn't yet set, but everything was dim beneath the heavy clouds. She unlocked her car, about to step in, when she froze. A piece of paper sat tucked beneath the windshield wiper. There was no wind. No one had been near her car all day. Her pulse quickened as she pulled it out. The message was written in small, neat handwriting. Just 4 words. He needs your help. There was no name, but Claire knew instantly. Layla had left it. She looked around, but the parking lot was empty except for a few lingering puddles reflecting the dull sky. She slipped the paper into her pocket, heart pounding, and got into the car. She should go home, call someone, tell the authorities. But what would she say? That a supernatural father might be a threat to his son? She barely believed it herself. What she did believe, what she felt with absolute certainty, was that Ethan was not safe. She started driving without knowing the destination, letting instinct guide her. The town blurred past, rows of brick houses, flickering street lamps, until she found herself on the road leading toward the outskirts. Then, as if pulled by an unseen thread, she turned down a narrow lane lined with dark trees. She didn't know Adrian's address, but she remembered the direction his car had driven the day before. The deeper she went, the more the air seemed to thicken. The branches arched overhead like ribs of an enormous creature, blocking out the remaining light. A tremor ran through her as she spotted it, a large iron gate almost swallowed by ivy, standing half open. A long driveway stretched beyond it, curving toward a mansion that looked older than the town itself. Its windows were dark, silent. Claire parked outside the gate, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles whitened. She shouldn't be here. She knew that. But the image of Ethan's defeated posture, his trembling hands, pushed her forward. She got out of the car, her shoes crunching on gravel, and stepped through the open gate. The mansion loomed above her, tall and cold, the kind of place where silence felt intentional. She swallowed and approached the front door. She didn't knock. She couldn't explain why. She simply felt that knocking would be an announcement, and announcements were dangerous. Instead, she gently tried the handle. It opened. A faint gasp escaped her. Inside, the air was colder than outside. A large chandelier hung above a grand entrance hall, its crystals dusty, its candles unlit. The atmosphere felt suspended, as if time here moved differently. Claire stepped inside, her senses alert. She heard water dripping somewhere, smelled the faint scent of old wood and something metallic beneath it. "Ethan," she called softly. No answer. Only the echo of her voice traveling too far, as if swallowed by endless hallways. She walked deeper into the mansion, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. Portraits lined the walls, portraits of pale figures with the same garnet eyes she had seen in Adrian. Their gazes followed her as she passed. One painting, larger than the rest, showed Adrian standing alone on a balcony, the night sky behind him swirling like smoke. His expression was unreadable, but something about it sent a cold shiver down her spine. A creak sounded behind her. Claire spun around. Layla stood in the doorway at the end of the hall, her face pale, her eyes wide. "You came," she whispered. "I hoped you would, but I wasn't sure you'd be brave enough." Claire stepped toward her. "Where is Ethan?" Layla's lips trembled. "Father is angry. He thinks Ethan's bond with you is dangerous for our family. He locked him in the East Wing." She hesitated. "He's not hurting him. Not yet. But if Father believes Ethan is becoming too human," her voice broke, "he'll take that humanity away." Claire didn't understand fully, but she understood enough. Ethan's life, his essence, was at risk. "Take me to him," she said. Layla nodded and turned, moving quickly down the corridor. Claire followed, heart racing, every shadow stretching long behind them. But before they reached the East Wing, a cold voice rose from the darkness ahead. "Claire." Adrian stepped forward, emerging from the shadows as if he had been part of them all along. His eyes glowed faintly. His presence filled the hallway like a storm. "You should not have come here." Claire froze. Adrian's presence pressed through the dim hallway like a force of nature, the air tightening until it felt hard to breathe. His eyes glowed faintly. 2 embers burning in a face carved from stone. Layla stepped in front of Claire instinctively, but Adrian didn't even look at her. His gaze was fixed entirely on the human woman who had stepped into his domain, uninvited. "I warned you," Adrian said quietly. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried through the hall like a blade sliding across glass. "This house is not a place for your kind." Claire steadied herself, though every instinct screamed at her to run. "Ethan didn't come to school," she said. "I needed to know he was all right." Layla's breath hitched. Adrian's gaze flicked briefly to his daughter, an unspoken reprimand that made her shrink back. "He is my son," he said evenly. "His safety is my concern." "But he's scared," Claire replied. Her voice trembled, but she refused to back down. "I saw it in his eyes. Whatever you're doing, whatever you think is protecting him, it's hurting him." For the first time, Adrian's expression shifted. Not in anger, not in surprise, in something closer to confusion, as if he had never heard anyone speak to him this way. Claire took a step forward, very slowly. "I'm not your enemy," she said. "I only want what's best for Ethan." Adrian's jaw tightened. "You cannot begin to understand what is best for him." "Then explain it to me," she challenged gently. "Help me understand you." The hall went silent, the only sound a faint drip echoing from somewhere deep in the mansion. Adrian stared at her with a look she couldn't decipher, as if trying to decide whether she was brave or foolish or both. The silence stretched. "Before we continue, tell me in the comments what you think of this story so far and what you would do in her place. Don't leave the video, because what comes next will give you chills." Adrian finally exhaled, his breath stirring the candle flames along the wall. "Come," he said. "If you want to understand, you will see." He turned and walked toward the east wing. Claire followed, though every step felt like walking deeper into a forest filled with predators. Layla clung to her side until they reached a long, arched door reinforced with iron. Adrian placed his palm against it, and the locks clicked open with a sound like bones shifting. Inside, Ethan sat on the floor of what looked like a library, his back against a wall lined with old books. His head snapped up when he saw Claire. "Miss Claire," he whispered, eyes wide with relief and fear all at once. Claire rushed to him, kneeling beside him. "Are you hurt?" He shook his head. "No, just scared." Adrian stepped inside. Layla positioned herself near Ethan protectively. The tension in the room thickened as the boy's eyes darted between his father and his teacher. Adrian folded his arms behind his back, posture perfectly straight. "Ethan is changing," he said calmly. "He is nearing the age when our blood awakens. He is becoming something more, and something less." His eyes darkened. "Humans fear us. They always have. If they knew what he was becoming, they would destroy him." Claire's breath caught. "Bullies aren't trying to destroy him," she said softly. "They're just children being cruel. But cruelty can be stopped. Fear can be taught away. You don't have to hide him." Adrian's expression hardened. "You speak as though humans are capable of acceptance." He stepped closer, voice low. "Do you know why we hide? Why we live in shadows? Because we have been hunted for centuries. My kind is strong, yes, but not invincible." He looked at Ethan, and for a moment the unbreakable king looked almost human. "I lost someone once," he said quietly, "because she believed humans could accept us." His eyes flicked to Claire. She was wrong. Claire listened, her heart softening despite the fear twisting inside her. "I'm sorry you lost someone," she whispered. "But Ethan shouldn't be punished for your past. He deserves a life, a real one, with friends, with safety, with choices." Ethan swallowed hard. "Father, I don't want to hide forever," he whispered. "And I don't want to lose Miss Claire." Adrian's head lifted slowly, his gaze sharpening. Claire felt something shift in the room, a current of emotion so old and dense it nearly cracked the air. He looked at her as if reevaluating everything he believed. Then a loud crash thundered from somewhere downstairs. Layla gasped. Ethan flinched. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Claire froze. "What was that?" Adrian inhaled slowly, his expression turning cold and deadly. "Something has entered this house," he murmured. "Something that does not belong." He stepped toward the door, his voice dropping into a tone that chilled Claire to her core. "They have found us." The crash echoed through the mansion with a weight that seemed to shake the walls themselves. Claire felt the vibration run up her spine. Adrian's expression had transformed, no longer conflicted or contemplative. Now he looked like what he truly was, a king preparing for battle. His eyes flared with a dark, burning light, and the air around him thickened with an energy Claire hadn't felt before. Ethan clutched his sister's sleeve. Layla's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean they found us?" Claire asked, trying to keep her voice steady even as fear prickled her skin. Adrian turned toward her, and for the first time, she saw fear behind his sternness. It was faint, but it was there. "A faction that hunts our kind," he said. "Humans, extremely trained ones." His voice dropped lower. "They call themselves the Wardens." Claire's heart raced. Hunters? Ethan and Layla are children. How could anyone want to hurt them? Adrian's jaw clenched. "To the Wardens, we are not families. We are threats." Another crash shook the lower floors, this one sharper, closer, a door splintering. Claire felt her body tense, instinct pushing her to grab Ethan's hand. Adrian's eyes flicked toward the gesture, and for a moment, something softened in him, just a fraction. But then he turned to Layla. "Stay here. Protect your brother," he ordered. Layla nodded, though her hands trembled. She pulled Ethan close to her. Adrian approached Claire. "You have no idea what you've walked into," he said quietly. "But you will survive this night. I give you my word." She stared at him, astonished by the shift in his tone. "What about Ethan? Layla?" His gaze held hers, unwavering. "I will die before I let any harm come to them." The sincerity in his voice, so fierce it bordered on sacred, cut through her fear like a clear note. Before she could respond, another sound sliced through the air. Heavy boots pounding the stairs, voices barking sharp commands. Claire's breath hitched. "They're inside the east wing," Layla whispered. Adrian moved toward the door, his posture tall and silent, like a shadow ready to strike. Claire grabbed his arm without thinking. "Adrian, you can't fight them alone." He looked back at her. For a moment the hall seemed to shrink, leaving only the two of them facing each other. "Miss Claire," he said softly, "I am not alone." It took her a second to understand. He meant her. Her chest tightened. "Tell me what to do." A flicker, like respect, passed through his eyes. But before he could speak, the library door burst open with a violent crack. 4 figures rushed in, dressed in black armor with silver insignias glinting on their shoulders. Their faces were hidden behind masks fitted with red-tinted lenses. They carried weapons Claire had never seen before, crossbows fused with metal cylinders, humming with faint, dangerous energy. "Move away from the creatures," one of them barked, pointing directly at Layla and Ethan. Claire stepped in front of the children without hesitation. Adrian's voice cut the air. "If you aim that weapon at her," he warned, "I will tear this house to ash around you." The leader's mask shifted toward him. "Adrian Vale," the hunter said, "the last pure-blood king." He raised the crossbow. "Your reign ends tonight." Everything froze. Claire's breathing, Ethan's trembling, the dust hanging in the light. Adrian moved, not like a man, like lightning splitting the air. He snatched the crossbow with a speed so impossible it blurred, snapped it in half, and lunged toward the second hunter. The room exploded into motion, hunters shouting, weapons firing bursts of silver light that shattered against stone walls. Layla pulled Ethan behind a heavy oak desk. Claire ducked, covering her head as a bolt of pure white energy scorched past her cheek, leaving a burning trail in the air. Adrian struck with precision, every movement fluid and sharp, his fury unleashed in controlled bursts. But the hunters were many, and more footsteps thundered down the hall. "Claire!" Layla cried. "Get Ethan out through the side door!" Claire crawled toward them, grabbing Ethan's arm. The boy clung to her as she pushed open a narrow wooden panel built into the wall, a hidden passage. Cold air rushed out. "Go!" she urged. Layla pushed Ethan inside, then turned back toward her father. "I'll help him." "No!" Adrian shouted, throwing a hunter backward with a force that cracked the marble. "Protect your brother!" Layla hesitated, torn, but then she obeyed, slipping into the passage with Claire and Ethan. Claire slammed the wooden panel shut behind them, plunging them into darkness lit only by faint strips of moonlight seeping through cracks in the stone. Behind the wall, she could still hear the battle. Shouts, the thrum of weapons, the crash of bodies colliding. Ethan's hand squeezed hers, trembling violently. "Miss Claire," he whispered, voice cracking. "They're going to kill him." Claire knelt, cupping his face gently. "No," she whispered. "Your father is stronger than any of them. We just need to get you someplace safe so he can fight without worrying about you." But in the darkness, Layla whispered what Claire didn't want to hear. "He's strong, but they brought something with them. Something that can kill even a king." Claire's breath caught. "What do you mean?" Layla swallowed. "They brought the Sunblade." The moment Layla whispered the word, Sunblade, the air in the hidden passage seemed to constrict. Ethan's breath hitched against Claire's shoulder. Claire didn't know what a Sunblade was, but the terror in Layla's voice was enough to make her blood run cold. "What is it?" Claire asked, keeping her voice steady only for the children's sake. Layla swallowed hard, her silhouette trembling in the dim slivers of moonlight. "A weapon made with fragments of the oldest dawn. It burns our kind from the inside out. Even a king can't survive its touch." Her voice cracked. "If they brought it, Father might not make it." Claire's heart thudded painfully. Somewhere on the other side of the wall, the sounds of the battle crashed and echoed, metal clashing, bodies hitting the ground, bursts of energy flashing like distant lightning. The mansion seemed to groan under the strain. "But before we continue, tell me if you would have the courage to live a story like this, or if something similar has ever happened to you. Don't leave the video, because what comes next will give you chills." Claire took Ethan's hand firmly. "We can't stay here. They'll find this passage eventually." She looked at Layla. "Where does it lead?" "Around the mansion," Layla whispered, "to the old observatory. It has an exit into the forest." "Then that's where we're going." They moved quickly through the narrow corridor. The walls were rough stone, damp with age, and the only sounds were their footsteps and Ethan's uneven breathing. Claire kept her arm protectively around him. This child, this fragile boy caught between two worlds, was depending on her in a way that felt larger than anything she'd faced before. As they turned a corner, a violent blast hit the wall beside them, sending dust and debris showering down. Claire shielded the children as the stones cracked, leaving a glowing scorch mark. "They're breaking through!" Ethan cried. Layla grabbed Ethan's hand. "Hurry!" They ran, the passage twisting and branching like a maze. Claire forced herself to focus, left, right, up a narrow staircase, until they reached a circular chamber with a domed ceiling. Sunlight streamed faintly through dusty glass panels high above, illuminating an old telescope and shelves of forgotten books. Layla rushed to a heavy wooden door on the far side. "This leads outside," she said, pushing with all her strength. The door groaned open, revealing the dark line of the forest just beyond. "Go," Claire urged. "I'll close the door behind us." But Ethan didn't move. His eyes glistened with fear, and something deeper, understanding. "Miss Claire, if they have the Sunblade, Father won't survive unless someone stops it." Layla turned to him, horrified. "Ethan, no. We have to run. That's what Father wanted." "But he protected us," Ethan said, voice breaking. "We can't leave him alone to die." Claire knelt in front of him. "Ethan, he told you to stay safe. But you told me something too," he whispered. "You said being different isn't a flaw, that it means you see things others can't." His small hands trembled. "I can feel where the Sunblade is. I can sense it. If I get close enough—" "No," Layla snapped, panic rising. "It'll kill you. It'll kill him first," Ethan cried. Claire's chest tightened painfully. She looked between the siblings, the fierce desperation in Ethan's eyes, the terror in Layla's, and then toward the mansion beyond the trees, where the echoes of fighting had grown louder, more desperate. Something deep inside her, something that felt older than logic, older than fear, settled into place. "I'm going back," she said. Layla stared at her in disbelief. You're human. The hunters won't spare you." "Adrian didn't spare me at first either," Claire said quietly. "But I stood between him and cruelty yesterday. Today, I stand between him and death." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "Miss Claire, you can't." "Yes," she murmured gently, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. I can, and I will. Layla stepped closer, voice shaking. If you touch the sunblade, you'll die too. I'm not planning on touching it. Claire rose to her feet, just stopping the one who's holding it. Another explosion shook the mansion, louder this time, followed by a roar that didn't sound human. Claire looked toward the forest, then back at the children. Go. Hide. Stay together. Her voice was firm, a strength she didn't know she had. I'll bring him back. Ethan reached for her hand one last time. Please come back too, he whispered. Claire squeezed his fingers gently. I promise I'll try. Then she stepped back into the mansion, the air vibrating with danger, determination burning in her chest. Somewhere inside those walls, the Vampire King was fighting for his life, and Claire, fragile, human, ordinary Claire, was walking straight into the fire. Claire stepped back into the mansion just as another tremor shook the floor beneath her feet. Dust drifted from the ceiling like falling ash. The air was thicker now, charged with the clash of power and violence deeper inside the halls. She moved quickly but quietly, her senses sharpened in a way she didn't recognize. Every distant footstep sounded nearer. Every flicker of torchlight seemed to stretch across the walls like warning signs. The East Wing corridor had been transformed into a battlefield. Sections of the walls were scorched. Shards of shattered marble littered the floor. Claire kept close to the walls, her breath shallow, listening for voices. She could hear the hunters, urgent, tense, communicating through harsh, whispered commands. They were spread throughout the wing, but the loudest sounds came from the grand hall at the mansion's center. That was where Adrian was. Claire pressed forward, pausing only when a sudden burst of white-blue light pulsed from the hall, illuminating the corridor like a flash of lightning. She flinched, raising an arm to shield her eyes. The blast was followed by a roar, deep, resonant, unmistakably Adrian. But there was pain in it. Her chest tightened. She forced herself to move. She edged closer to the hall's entrance, crouching beside a broken section of wall. Through the fractured opening, she could see shapes moving. Shadows danced violently across the marble floor. Hunters surrounded Adrian, 5 of them now, circling him like wolves pursuing a wounded lion. Adrian stood at the center, breathing hard. His coat was torn, dark blood staining his side, but his eyes burned with defiance. And in the hands of one hunter, the tallest, standing slightly behind the others, was a weapon unlike anything Claire had seen, a sword forged of light. Its blade glowed with a golden-white radiance that hurt to look at, like staring into the heart of the sunrise. The energy hummed like a living thing, its edges shimmering as if sunlight itself had been folded into a blade. The Sunblade. Adrian's gaze flicked toward it, and though he masked it well, Claire saw the truth. He feared that weapon. The hunter holding it stepped forward. "Kneel," he commanded. "End this without more bloodshed." Adrian lifted his chin, blood trailing from his lip. "I kneel to no human." The hunter raised the Sunblade. Claire's body moved before her mind caught up. She scanned the hall. There, a toppled table, its wooden legs splintered. Closer, a fallen hunter's crossbow, cracked but intact enough to draw attention. And near her, an ornate iron wall sconce, broken in the commotion, but still heavy, solid. She grabbed the iron piece, then waited. She needed one moment, one opening, one heartbeat when the hunter's attention wasn't fixed on Adrian. A loud crash came from the far side of the hall as Adrian hurled one of the attackers against a pillar. Marble cracked. The hunter with the Sunblade turned his head for a single second. Claire threw the broken iron sconce with every ounce of strength she had. The metal struck the ground in front of the hunter with a violent clang, sliding across the marble and sparking as it went. The sound echoed like thunder. The hunter startled, instinctively stepping back. Adrian moved. In less than a breath, he lunged, knocking 2 hunters aside with a force that sent their weapons flying across the floor. Claire scrambled behind a column as bolts of silver energy flew past her, slamming into the wall where she had been standing only seconds before. The hunter with the Sunblade recovered quickly. "There's a human in the house!" he shouted. "Find them!" Claire's stomach dropped. Adrian reacted before the others could. "You will not touch her," he thundered, voice booming with a fury that shook the hall. The Sunblade wielder raised the weapon again. Adrian tried to dodge, but he staggered, his injuries slowing him. The Sunblade arced downward. Claire screamed, "Adrian!" He looked up, just for a moment, long enough for their eyes to meet. And in that moment, something shifted. Not fear, recognition, purpose. Adrian twisted his body at the last second. The Sunblade grazed his arm instead of piercing his chest. He cried out, a raw, guttural sound, as smoke rose from the wound. The scent of burning flesh filled the hall. "Adrian!" Claire ran toward him without thinking. The hunter snarled, pulling the blade back for another strike. But Adrian moved with sudden, brutal speed. Using the last burst of his strength, he seized the hunter's wrist, driving his hand upward and slamming him against a pillar. The Sunblade clattered to the ground, its light dimming as it skidded across the marble. Claire was already running. She dove for the weapon, not to pick it up. She wasn't foolish enough to touch it, but to kick it as hard as she could beneath a fallen tapestry. The blade disappeared beneath the heavy fabric just as another hunter lunged toward her. Adrian's roar ripped through the hall. He launched himself between Claire and the hunter, his body shielding hers completely. "Run!" he shouted. "No!" Claire cried. "I'm not leaving you!" But before she could say more, a deafening crash shook the entire mansion. Something, or someone, had forced the front doors open. Reinforcements, hunters, more than before. Adrian turned toward Claire, his expression grave. "This is no longer a battle," he said. "It is a siege." Claire's pulse hammered, and deep inside her, she felt the truth. They might not all survive what was coming next. The front doors slammed open with a force that made the chandeliers tremble. Claire's heart lurched as a second wave of hunters poured into the mansion, silent, disciplined, their weapons raised in perfect formation. They spread through the grand hall with frightening precision, their red-tinted masks glowing like the eyes of mechanical predators. Claire instinctively stepped closer to Adrian, even as her legs trembled beneath her. Adrian stood tall, despite the burns searing through his arm. His body was tense, coiled like something ancient, remembering its true nature. Marble dust drifted around him like fog. Claire felt the air shift, this time colder, heavier, as if the very walls of the mansion braced themselves. The lead hunter stepped forward. "Your son is already contained," he said, voice echoing through his mask. "Surrender now, King Vale, and perhaps the half-bloods will be spared." Half-bloods. The word felt like poison. Claire clenched her fists. "Ethan and Layla are children." The hunter turned toward her. "They are weapons waiting to awaken." Adrian's snarl ripped through the hall. "You will not touch them." The hunter raised his rifle. "Then you die first." The instant the weapon charged, Adrian grabbed Claire by the waist and pulled her behind a fallen column just as a bolt of piercing silver light shot across the hall, exploding against the marble. Shards flew. Claire covered her head, her ears ringing. Adrian shielded her completely, absorbing most of the impact against his back. "Adrian, your arm—" Claire gasped, seeing smoke rising from the burn. "I've endured worse," he said, voice thick with pain. "Stay behind me." More bolts fired, lighting up the hall like violent stars. Adrian moved with impossible speed, dodging, deflecting, leaping from one shadow to another. But there were too many hunters now. Their formation tightened, trapping him in a semicircle. Claire peered from behind the rubble, breath sticking in her throat. Adrian fought with precision, but fatigue dragged at his limbs. Each movement was slower than the last. The burn on his arm glowed unnaturally, spreading like vines of light beneath his skin. The Sunblade's wound was poisoning him. Claire pressed a hand to her mouth. "He's dying." Her chest tightened painfully, but before she could move, she saw something small and soft skitter across the floor. A whisper of movement near the hall's far edge. Layla. The girl crawled from the shadows of the upper balcony, her face streaked with tears, her eyes burning with desperate courage. She must have doubled back, following Claire through the forest and into the mansion. Ethan wasn't with her, meaning she'd hidden him somewhere safe. Layla crouched low, her eyes fixed on her father. Claire's breath caught. She was going to attack. No, no. A child couldn't. But Layla wasn't just a child. She was half vampire, and she was furious. She dropped from the balcony silently, landing behind a hunter with predatory grace. Before he could turn, she slammed into him, knocking his weapon aside. The hall erupted in chaos as hunters turned toward her. "Layla!" Adrian roared, horror cutting through his voice. "No!" Claire didn't think. She sprinted toward the girl, grabbing her hand and pulling her behind a cracked pillar just as another bolt of silver energy burst behind them. "Layla, what are you doing?" Claire cried. "I won't let them kill him," Layla sobbed, shaking uncontrollably. "He can't fight alone." "You can't fight them either," Claire said, holding her shoulders firmly. "But we can outsmart them." Layla sniffed. "How?" Claire looked at Adrian. He was cornered now, breathing hard, wounds glowing. The hunters raised their weapons again, preparing a final, unified strike. Claire whispered, "The sunblade wound is weakening him. If he falls, they'll take all of you. But they don't know one thing yet." Layla blinked. "What?" Claire exhaled. "That I'm here." She stepped out from behind the pillar. "Stop!" she yelled. Her voice cracked across the hall like a whip. Every hunter turned. Adrian's head snapped toward her, eyes widening in disbelief. "Claire, no!" But she kept walking, hands raised, heart pounding. "You want me?" she said. "Then stop attacking him." The lead hunter tilted his head. "Why would we want you?" "Because without me," Claire said, "Adrian Vale dies tonight." Confusion flickered in the hunter's stance. Claire took another step. "You saw him protect me. You saw how he reacted when I was in danger." Her voice shook, but she forced the words out. "You're smart enough to realize what that means." A tense silence. Then the hunter said, "He cares for you." Claire swallowed. "Yes." Adrian closed his eyes for half a second. A flicker of vulnerability, quickly erased. The hunter lowered his weapon slightly. "Then you'll do. He'll trade." Adrian lunged forward, voice thundering. "Claire, no, don't!" But more hunters moved toward her, surrounding her instantly. Claire lifted her chin. If giving herself up would stop the battle, even for a moment, it was worth it. It would give Adrian time to recover, time to fight, time to live. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the sunblade hidden beneath the tapestry had begun to glow again. Waking, humming, calling. The sunblade hummed beneath the fallen tapestry, soft at first, like a whisper of light trying to breathe. Then it grew brighter, the fabric glowing from underneath as if dawn itself were trapped inside it. None of the hunters noticed. None of them could. Their attention was locked on Claire, the human woman now standing at the center of the hall, surrounded by enemies she had no hope of overpowering. Adrian saw it. He felt it. The sword's awakening sent a pulse through his body, a burning thread that tugged at the wound in his arm. His knees buckled for a moment, but he forced himself upright. He knew what would happen if the weapon fully awakened. It would seek its target. Him. And this time, it would not miss. "Let her go," Adrian commanded, his voice hoarse but still carrying the weight of a king. "She is not part of this war." The lead hunter pressed a blade to Claire's shoulder. Not enough to cut, but enough to threaten. "You will surrender," he said, "or we take her apart piece by—" He didn't finish. Adrian moved so fast, the air snapped around him. Suddenly he was inches from the hunter, eyes blazing with something ancient and unforgiving. "You will not touch her," Adrian growled. The hunter tightened his grip on Claire. "You can't stop us. You're wounded. There are 10 of us." Adrian's chest rose and fell, each breath heavy with pain. Yet his voice stayed steady. "I don't need strength to protect her, only will." Claire shook her head. "Adrian, no, don't trade yourself for me." But the hunters shifted, sensing victory. "Good," the leader said. "Kneel." Adrian straightened, refusing. "I bow to no one." The hunter raised his weapon. Claire acted. She didn't think. She didn't weigh consequences. She grabbed the leader's wrist with both hands and yanked it downward just as the weapon fired. The silver bolt scorched the marble floor, exploding in a burst of blinding light. Hunters shouted, stumbling back. Adrian lunged. He knocked Claire to the ground, shielding her with his body as bolts flew from every direction. The hall erupted into chaos, energy blasts, shouts, the scrape of boots on stone. Claire clung to Adrian's coat as he pulled her behind a fallen column. "You're hurt," she gasped. "So are you," he growled, wiping blood from her cheek. "Stay down." But then the hum beneath the tapestry became a roar. The sunblade burst out in a blinding eruption of light, tearing the fabric apart. Hunters froze. Adrian's eyes widened. "It's calling me," he whispered. The blade soared upward, suspended midair like a burning star, then slashed toward Adrian with terrifying speed. "No!" Claire screamed. Adrian braced for the impact, but it never came, because Claire ran between them. She didn't touch the blade. She simply stepped into its path, and the moment she did, everything stopped. The sunblade halted inches from her chest, its light flickering erratically, as if confused. It trembled in the air, the glow dimming and brightening, as if searching for an enemy and finding something else instead. Something it could not strike. Adrian stared at her, breathless. "Claire, it won't harm a human. It can't," the leader hissed. "Move, girl. It's meant to kill him." "No," Claire said, voice steady despite her shaking hands. "If you want him, you've got to go through me." For the first time, the hall fell silent. The hunters hesitated, not out of mercy, but out of confusion. The sunblade refusing to strike a target disrupted everything. The formation broke, their confidence cracked. Adrian felt the shift, and he moved. With a surge of strength born from desperation, he hurled himself at the nearest hunter, ripping the mask from his face. Layla, who had slipped back into the hall unseen, grabbed a fallen weapon and used it to knock another hunter off balance. Chaos erupted again, but this time, the momentum was theirs. The hunters retreated, shouting orders, scrambling toward the doors as Adrian drove them back with a ferocity they could no longer match. The wounded leader signaled the retreat. "Fall back! We're compromised! Fall back!" In moments, the hall emptied, leaving only silence, rubble, and the fading hum of the sunblade as it drifted to the floor, dimming completely. Claire collapsed to her knees, trembling. Adrian knelt beside her immediately, taking her hands in his own. "You stepped between me and the sunblade," he whispered, disbelief raw in his voice. "Why?" Claire met his gaze. "Because no one deserves to die alone, not even a king." For a moment, Adrian couldn't speak. His eyes softened, not with hunger, not with power, but with something heartbreakingly human. Gratitude, respect, maybe more. Layla rushed to them, throwing herself into her father's arms, sobbing. Claire wrapped an arm around Ethan when he appeared moments later, shaking but safe. They were alive, all of them. What did you think of the story? Subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who will also be moved today.